Hello, I'm Theolyn and this is Signs and Wonders. And if you want to keep track of my videos, please make sure you subscribe at theolyn.com and then you'll always get a notification when I put up a new video. At the time that I'm making this particular video, there's been some very heavy political scenes going on in the United States of America. And that's not to say there aren't heavy political scenes going on all the time in different places, but this has been focused on the American elections, and because America is such a huge influence in world affairs, of course that is very concerning. Now, in my last video, I was talking about Venus and talking about beauty and harmony, and what happened when the capital, the center of political activity in Washington, was stormed, was quite the reverse of harmony. It was war, it was battle. It was not very pleasant at all. And when astrologers look at this, they notice that the god of war, Mars, the planet that represents the god of war, was just going into the last degree of a sign where it's very, it really enjoys being, and that's the sign of Aries. Mars, you may know, of course, rules the sign of Aries. And when it's in Aries, it's got full-on power to use as it wishes. That doesn't need to say it has to be used negatively. It depends who's using it, right? But in the very last degree of Aries, which is called an anaretic degree, the god is sort of saying, oh my goodness, I'm just going to move out of this really great place that I've been in, and how can I use this energy up quickly? And one astrologer that I was listening to pointed out that the timing of it was very precise, that the last degree was when this capital march began and culminated on the steps of the capital. But as it tipped over, Mars tipped over into Taurus, which is a slightly more harmonious sign, being ruled by Venus, the police came in and the whole thing was defused after quite a few hours of deep trouble. So here we have a sign that we can see in the astrology. And of course, many people in places of power do not accept astrology. It is said that Ronald Reagan, as an American president, did take an interest in astrology and would sometimes ask for meetings at rather unusual times of day because his wife Nancy had checked out with their favourite astrologer for what is called an elective chart. So what would be the best time to have this meeting? And Ronald Reagan would summon people to meetings in the White House at rather peculiar times as far as other people were concerned. However, this is not usually the way politicians go about things, because, the astrologers might have said, oh, well, the signs were there. The signs were there in Trump's Twitters. The signs are there in the heavens. And so those two things are coinciding. The heavenly movement of the planet Mars is not causing that to happen. And this is where we have to have a really good think about the gods. And we've named those planets. We've named them after Greek gods, or they were named at the time by the Greeks and other people. They were given those names a long way back in our history. And interestingly, when we discovered the moons of Mars, we gave them names as well that relate to the difficulties that can happen when Mars goes for the violent extreme of that energy. There's Phobos and Deimos. And Phobos is about fear and panic. Deimos is about terror and dread. So those moons were discovered in later centuries, but they were still given the names of difficult gods, little gods. Phobos and Deimos were not, chief gods. So again, something in our human collective way of looking at our world keeps bringing us back to the notion that there are these quote, quote, gods. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show you a little picture I've got here. I don't know how well it shows up on the screen because it's under glass and it's probably quite reflective. But that is Will's. Yes, it's reflecting the mirror. It's reflecting the lamp on my. You might be able to see it. So there's Mars with Phobos and Deimos. And that's painted by Will. I'm rather fond of that picture. But you could see from that he is in armour and he is wearing, red. And he was in full battle gear. And that's what Mars is like, especially when he's in the sign of Aries. He's up for a fight, really. And it'll take Venus to come along and cozy up to him and say, no, we don't need to fight anymore. And there are signs of that happening down the line in the summer, but I'll leave that for another video. So let's get back to this story about the gods. Are the gods in charge? Can the gods help us? That's what I wanted to ask. Can it help us to know, for example, that the energetic quality of this activity of a planet, the red planet it's called, out in, the solar system, we're saying that may have some connection, some synchronicity, coincidence with what goes on planet Earth. And then we see something happening like the storming of the Capitol. And what can we do about it if we know? Or can we talk to those gods, quote, and say, hold on, we don't want it to work out like that. We want it to work out in a different way. And this is a big philosophical question because it comes back to this whole notion of, to what extent are patterns of behaviour, patterns of human activity going to naturally lead to certain results, certain revolutions, perhaps, is something predestined to work out the way it did? If you look back in history, say to the French Revolution, when the people stormed the Bastille, is that inevitable? Is that a kind of destiny for the collective of the French people? Is the storming of the Capitol a natural destiny for the collective of the American people? Is that a process that they have to go through as a group? And does that apply to individual people, that we have to go through a process in order to reach some kind of new way of seeing things, a new perspective? Now, this is a big and complicated issue to discuss in just a short video, and the Signs and Wonders videos are intended just to be little tasters. But it is a topic that's very significant for the kind of people like you who are looking not just for answers of, what's going on in politics and why or how, and could it be different, but answers for things that are going on for you personally. How and why, and could it be different? And that comes back to this question that I was raising. Can the gods help us? Now, if the gods are aspects of consciousness, and when we see the manifested outer appearance of that state of consciousness, and we call it a god, we call a planet a god because we've seen it and it seems to coincide in its activities with what goes on for us at an interior level or to mundane level, then we start to recognize that the inner and the outer have got this connection. And this comes back to the notion that the kingdom of heaven is within us. All the gods are within us. Therefore, all the gods are part of who we are. But how can we get to know them so they can help us? Or is it a question of us getting to know them so we can command them, so that they're not in charge, so that we are conscientiously working with the different energetic qualities, archetypal qualities they're called, especially in Jungian psychology. Getting to know those characters allows us as individuals to say, okay, I recognize that I have the god of war as part of my consciousness. And I want to have a conversation with that god of war and say, how are you going to play out your energy? Because the god of war, Mars, in this astrological format, he's called Mars. The Romans called him Ares. He has different names, or it has different names, we should say. That energy, that drive to get something, to go out into the world and seize something that you want, we all have that. We all have Mars inside us. We all have a fighter. Whether we use that fighter in an aggressive way, in a destructive way, or whether we use that fighter in an assertive and positive way, that is a matter of choice. And that's what comes back to, the great teachers of non-violent confrontation, because Mars can work like that as well, if Mars chooses. And who is Mars? Mars isn't himself, isn't a power of his own. He's only a power that human beings allow in the world. So that's part of a very, very big story. And as I say, I'm going to focus down on it more deeply over the next few weeks, when I'm going to offer a workshop or a webinar using the internet. So I've got a longer space, and then you can ask questions about it. So look out for news about a free webinar coming down the line this spring, when I've got my act together, probably be February 2021, and I'll invite you to join for free. But make sure you've signed up at Theolyn.com so you hear about it. Many blessings, and keep shining. And keep your Mars in his place. Make sure you don't allow him to wreak havoc in your life.